Hello, welcome to the Praying Christian Women podcast. I am Alana here with Jamie. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. What's something fun you've been up to lately?
Getting ready for Thanksgiving for our oldest to come back, getting his room ready because he doesn't have a bed. He doesn't have, like, basically, his room had been the room we store everything in. So,
Yeah.
digging it out, just wanting him to feel like, oh, I've got somewhere to crash when I get here. So,
Yeah.
that's been fun though. And yesterday he had a little extra time. Usually during the week we don't hear from him very much other than
Mm,
just a text here and there, but he actually FaceTimed and talked a little bit. So that was cool. He's excited to come home.
good. Yeah,
Yeah, how
no,
about you?
that's great. Nothing too new. We're getting cold. We're down in like the -15, -17.
I was
So,
just thinking about that this morning when I went out in a
yeah.
hoodie and I was like, it's supposed to be colder by now.
It's definitely there here. But I'm excited. We get to continue on in our Proverbs 31 discussion. And we've been talking about how does a Proverbs 31 woman pray? What prayer lessons can we gain from this passage? How can we read this passage without feeling like failures or feeling like every woman around us is somebody that we have the right to judge? So I'm really excited that we get to jump in. So we're going to start at verse 30 says, Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And just in the very off chance that we get to two verses, I'll finish with verse 31. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. So I want to start with the charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting. So my just for fun is what's the most extreme thing you've done in the sake of beauty, or like the thing that totally did not work out the way you thought it would work out when you were younger, trying to look all beautiful?
Okay. So there was this time when I was maybe, I don't remember, maybe 6, 7, 8, like in that range, little kid,
Hmm.
but older than toddler. And I had a crush on okay, so it's like a family friend's husband that we didn't see very often, but he was just really cute. I just thought he was like so handsome. He reminded me of like Prince Charming or something.
Aw.
And they knew it. Like it was my
Uh-huh.
mom's cousin and her husband, or my mom's cousin and his wife, and then their best friends. And yeah,
Hmm.
so we were all gonna go, like the cousins were in town. We were getting together with the friends that were somewhat local. And I just remember that we were about to go to dinner. And I don't know why, but I had this thing about like bags under my eyes. I felt like I always looked like I had bags under my eyes.
When you were
Like
6?
when I looked in the mirror, like it looked like I had dark circles kind of, and I didn't
Uh-huh.
like, I don't know what,
Hmm.
maybe 7, 8, I don't know. But I just didn't like it. So I remember my mom had this big, like round thingy of like kind of pearly white body powder. It was like kind of shimmery
Huh.
when you put it on, but it was very white and there's a big puff on the top of it. So
Hmm.
it was like after you get out of the shower, you just kind of, so I went in and knowing I was going to get all gussied up because,
Uh-huh.
Prince Charming is going to be at dinner. And so I took my finger and got like some of the powder and I put it under my like under my eyes where I
Uh-huh.
perceived there were dark circles.
Uh-huh.
And like I can't, you know how your view of stuff is very different than what everyone else sees. I thought I looked
Hmm.
fantastic.
Oh
I'm like, oh man,
no.
I look good. And I went out and my mom looks and she's like, oh, what did you do?
Oh.
And it wasn't mean or anything.
Yeah.
But then the women, the wife of the guy, and then the wife of my mom's cousin, who were all very sweet about it and all, but
Yeah.
they knew that I thought that this guy
Aw.
was really cute. So anyway, they were just like, were you trying to get, were you trying to look nice for so and
For so
so?
and so.
And and I was mortified. And so I went in and I'm like
Aw.
washing it off and
Poor
but
thing.
yeah, I mean it wasn't a scarring event. It's funny and I look back on it, but and they treated it very funny, but I just remember
Yeah.
I thought I looked so good and I came out and didn't.
Aw. Did they take a picture?
I don't think so. No, this is like when film was precious, and I also
That's
think they were
true.
they were be. It was like the ladies kind of were like, okay, go
Mm-hmm.
back, wash it off, and maybe we'll do this,
Aw.
and like and maybe one of them did my hair. Like it was very sweet.
Aw.
So yeah.
See, I feel kind of sad because when I was that age, so from 3 until 8, I just had my dad and my brother. So I didn't go through the stage of trying to steal my mom's makeup or do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like trying to put, fingernail polish on. My dad was really good about it. One thing he did, because I was on a baton team
Oh,
where
that's
you
cool.
do,
I don't think I
yeah.
knew that about you.
Did you
You
not?
learn
Yeah.
something new every day.
Yeah, so through most of elementary school, and we got pretty competitive. And, so obviously you do things like your hair looks good. I forget if we were makeup. I think we probably had lipstick or something. And what I appreciate that my dad did for me is every night before a competition, I would just spend with one of the girls on my team. There were five of us, and I just kind of rotated around. And it never entered my mind that none of the other girls did this. But basically, we'd wake up in the morning, the moms would do their daughter's hair, the moms would do my hair. If they were going to do a little lipstick or a little blush, they'd do that on there. And, and then my dad, he would still come to most of the things and just kind of meet us there. So I really appreciate that he took kind of those extra steps to make sure that I was able to do, the hair and the makeup because it's not something that he probably would have felt comfortable,
Right. Or
learning and
even would have
doing.
known how to do it. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But I also appreciate that none of the girls, none of the moms, nobody made it out to be weird, right? It was just like I was probably in my late teens before I realized, you know what? I was the only one who spent the night at a friend. And it wasn't like my one best friend. And so we just enjoyed doing it. It was, it was kind of like I think all the moms just sort of, took turns adopting little little momless baby girl. So
Oh.
but I do appreciate that because there are some things like that. And then when my dad remarried, I remember like watching my stepmom put on her makeup every morning and so I was older, but so it wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to wear makeup like this. It just basically turned into the time where we could talk about, just starting off the day slow. I just come in and sit on her bed and she'd be doing her makeup and we just kind of be hanging out or the news would be on, so I have fun memories about that. And then it also kind of reminds me when I was on the Palm Squad because it was a similar thing. We did little rocket braids, like the two French braid pigtails, and we would always get together at one of the girls' home and basically the families took turns hosting. So you'd have dinner there, you'd get dressed there, and then everybody would do each other's hair. Something very sweet about like women and girls doing each other's hair. I think it's a very like you got to trust somebody to do that. I heard once like there's a reason why there's kind of this stereotype that we spill our guts to like our hairdressers or something because it is kind of it's a bonding experience for sure. So,
Yeah, well, so I don't know if I can even recommend this book because I don't remember all the details of it, but it was very fascinating. It's called The Red Tent and
oh
it's
yeah,
historical fiction. Have you heard of this
I've read
book?
it. I don't think I would recommend it if you're looking for Christian fiction or biblical
No, it's
fiction,
not.
but
It's
it
it's
is
not like biblically
interesting.
accurate, but it's just the interesting thing to me was the idea of I just in our society today we forget that womanhood looked very different back in biblical
Hmm.
times.
Hmm.
And the idea behind the red tent was when the women had their monthly cycle, they would go to this red tent, and that was where they basically hung out while they were
Hmm.
bleeding. Or, but it was
Yeah.
also a place, I'm guessing, I think I remember that, like, because of being in close proximity, a lot of them had synchronized cycles.
Yeah.
And so they would spend time there. Now, my question
Hmm.
is, how did anything get done when they were
When
there?
all
You
the
know,
women are
how
doing that.
did,
And
right. I'm sure
hmm
it wasn't all of them, but it just kind of a lot of the activity surrounding it, the idea of womanhood and women passing down their womanly knowledge from generation to
yeah.
generation. And I feel like
Hmm.
so much of that has been lost just because we're not in a lot of us, many of us maybe are, but many of us are not in multi-generational proximity to
Yeah.
in families. And so I just look back and I think of I got to grow up around a lot of extended family. I know you did too. Um,
Hmm.
but our kids haven't had that. They have limited interactions and definitely not like close quarter interactions over weeks
Hmm.
and months and years at a
Yeah.
time with women of older generations to have that like bonding,
Hmm.
like kind of like you were talking about sitting on the bed with nothing else to do or talk about other
Hmm.
than like, oh, hey, let's bond.
Yeah.
Let me observe you and kind of absorb what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So yeah, I love we get to chat about this. It really is a good reminder. I love this part of the verse. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting. And you brought it up too. Beauty standards change from year to year, from decade to decade. The time it was driven home to me the most is I was looking for new, just kind of exercise routines I could do, like just like some type of Pilates or something I could do while the family's watching TV and I could just, put it on YouTube in the corner and kind of do stuff. The exercises we're doing, like the squats and the lunges and like the hamstring curls, in the videos today, they're talking about how you can do these exercises to get like a nice round firm rear end. And in the 90s, it was the exact same exercises that you could do to get a teeny tiny trim rear end that nobody would even know was there, which was the standard of that day. And it really drove home just beauty is commercialized, right? So much of it is because of the cosmetic industry, the fashion industry, to a degree, probably just like the Hollywood elite kind of celebrity sort of thing. Did you ever read? It's one of the more obscure Dr. Seuss books. Did you ever read the Star-Bellied Sneetches book?
Yes.
So, for people who aren't familiar, to me, this is like Dr. Seuss's very most insightful work
Agreed.
and very, very profound. So there is this race of Sneetches who live on beaches, and the upper class Sneetches are the ones who have a star on their belly, and they look down at all the plain bellied Sneetches. And then this charlatan comes into town, this con man, and tells all the Sneetches who don't have a star on their belly that they can pay him to go into his star on machine. So now everybody has a star on their belly and the con man's getting a lot of money. So now the first batch of elite sneeches are upset. And so then the charlatan comes and says, oh, haven't you heard? Now all the cool sneeches are the ones who don't have a star on their belly. And you can pay me money to go into my star off machine. And it just keeps cycling and he keeps getting richer and richer and richer. And thankfully the book has a happy ending in the end. Like everybody's so confused as to like who's what and what's who that they all just kind of get along, which,
Right.
it's a nice happy ending. But I find it so sad that I spent like an entire like decade and a half being like, okay, to be beautiful, I've got to be wispy thin. I've got to take up no space at all. I'm going to try these diets or, if I had been someone of purchasing power at the time, I've got to buy all these things to do all this stuff, only for 15 years later to be told, oh, no, actually, now everybody wants you to have curves. And, oh, okay, well, let me spend more money. Let me spend more emotional energy agonizing over this. And it's so sad. And then what happens is women get pit against each other when really, like, the enemy is that con man who's telling us that having a star on your belly is beautiful or having a star off your belly is beautiful. But we compare ourselves to each other. So it's like, oh, she's so pretty. She must be a brat. Or, oh, I don't want to be seen with her. She doesn't take care of herself. Or sometimes we make like our weight or our appearance a moral issue. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, she really let herself go, as in like gaining 10 pounds naturally because your hormone shift is a sin. Like I get very sad that this is where women are, and I feel like they probably have been there for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, for eternity, not eternity, but as long as the earth has been around and people have been around, I think that's been,
Hmm.
I mean, you see biblical stories of jealousy among women
Mm-hmm.
about appearance, or this
Yeah.
one, Rebecca, Rachel,
Yeah, and Leah had what, plain
Layla.
eyes or weak eyes is I think one of the translations. Like, what does that even mean?
Well, it's funny because the red tent actually has an idea of what that means.
Oh
It's
yeah, she
interesting.
cross-eyed or something.
I think so. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
But but she's actually, yeah, but anyway, that's totally digression. But you see these conflicts and
Yeah.
these women. So I'm sure it's always been a thing, but if you think about, like, what I think about is the amount of time it takes out of our lives to worry about that, the amount of
I
energy
know.
that it
I know.
takes away from eternal things to
Hmm.
obsess about the physical things. And you
Yeah.
can take that to an extreme, of course, because we've talked about how you could take it to the extreme of, oh, she's so heavenly minded that she's no earthly good, and keep someone from wanting to do something
Right.
aesthetically pleasing to them, like getting their nails
Exactly.
done, or
Yeah.
going to a spa, or getting a beauty
Hmm.
cream when you want to
Hmm.
look nice, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, I think a lot of us probably err on the side of spending too much time worrying about
Mm.
appearance and what other people think, rather than, not saying you need to trade that for straight prayer and spiritual discipline,
Hmm.
but that you need to trade that for self-love and gratitude for
Yeah.
whose God has made you to be and how. It doesn't mean that we can't consider our bodies a temple. And I know for certain that I don't exercise enough. I'm not healthy
Hmm.
enough in that regard, not because I want to look a certain way, but because I want to be healthy. I want to
Yeah.
take care of myself and be here for my kids and my grandkids.
Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely don't want to just discount that. But I also don't want to
Yeah.
obsess over it. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad we get to chat about this. Before we go too much farther, would you mind opening us up in some prayer?
yeah. God, we just thank you so much for another opportunity to talk about Proverbs 31. We thank you, God, that you've made us in your image, that you've given us the tools that we need to communicate with you through prayer and through your word. And we just pray that this time would be glorifying to you. Lord, I just ask that you would guide and direct our conversation. And for each of us, Lord, I just pray that you would help us, if we haven't recently, to just think about how you've made us uniquely and beautifully. Help us to see ourselves more closely to how you see us. I just pray that you would silence the voices from outside of us, from inside of our own brain, that you would just help us to appreciate and acknowledge that we're beautiful. Amen.
All right. So before we talk more about like the beauty industry and how much of a pitfall it can be, and how the worst parts of the patriarchy are why I can never wear pants that have the right size pockets. Before we get on those kinds of tangents, let's talk about the first part of the verse. Charm is deceptive. What do you think? Like, to me, the connotation of charming is kind of like fake. Like, I have this visceral reaction, like, ooh, I don't like that kind of, kind of like the politician who just work in the room. What do you think of when you think of someone who's called charming?
Yeah, I think of someone who's smooth, someone who maybe has a gravity about them that draws you to them, charismatic,
Hmm.
and in itself, it isn't bad. I mean, it's not a bad thing to be charismatic, to be, I think God can use charismatic people to do amazing things, because a lot of times people that have charm, that have charisma, can draw people to themselves and draw attention to their
Hmm.
message or to their cause. I've known pastors that have been, I think pastors are a good example, because I've known pastors that have been very charismatic and
Yeah.
very godly and biblical.
And we're
I've
not
also
necessarily
known,
talking about the theology. We're
no,
talking about
right, that's
like
a good point.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
talking about the presence, right? I think of
their
someone with
presence.
charisma, like really engaging, a really
Yeah.
good public speaker, very, very confident, but not necessarily like arrogant and stuck on themselves. Just somebody who, they probably have a more commanding voice or, booming presence. That's what I think of. And I totally agree. I think if you've got that gift, you can be absolutely genuine and absolutely sincere and humble and use that gift for the Lord. I think my husband's kind of like that, right? Like he is always going to be one of the loudest in the room, but you also don't walk away being like, whoa, what a fake. You just walk away
Right.
being like, wow, this guy really likes people, you know.
Right. But when you
Whereas
have that,
charm, go ahead, you
no,
finish.
no, no, you go, I want to hear the difference. Yeah.
I feel like to me, charm is kind of the insincere flip-flop of that. So it's not, I'm gonna walk right up to you with my big strong voice and say, "Hey, Jamie, it's great to see you because I love you." I'm gonna do it because like I want something from you or I want you to do something for me. That's what I think of as charming. And as somebody who is more, just kind of quiet and demure, I need to remind myself that not everybody who is like loud and booming and full of presence that doesn't mean they're arrogant necessarily. That doesn't mean they're full of themselves. And it could be exactly the way God gifted them, right? Like when we're all downstairs in the fellowship hall on a potluck Sunday, we need somebody. We're like sheep without a shepherd. We need somebody with a very loud voice to come and say, "Hey, everybody, it's time to pray," or else we're never going to know when it's time to eat, right? So having that booming presence is a gift. Did you ever see the movie Simon Birch? Or
Yes.
did you ever read the book A Prayer for Owen Meany? It's based off of that book. This is one that I would recommend. They have a tiny bit of like preteen boy humor, but it is, I think it's actually a really insightful movie. And basically the premise is there's a little boy, and by little I mean like he's a preteen, but he's like he has dwarfism or he has some kind of disorder. And additionally, this is drawn out way more so in the book. He's got a very strange voice. And the way God, and he's convinced that God has a plan for him, even though everybody laughs at him, and it's in the 50s, and he's on the wrong side of the tracks and all of this stuff, but he is convinced that God made him this way for a reason. And the spoiler is his small size and the fact that he's got this strange voice that makes everybody stop and listen actually allows him to save a bus full of kids in an accident because he's able to stand up and take command and the kids listen to him. And because he's small, he's able to like, squeeze out the window and help the other kids out and stuff. So anyway, I am no, oh, I completely lost my train of thought. Just going on and on about this fun movie. But there is absolutely a time to recognize people who've got that charisma, right? Or we think about, some of the great preachers that came out of the Enlightenment or things like that. Not all of them had that charisma, but we can assume that some of them did, or they wouldn't have attracted the kinds of following that they got. It comes with potential pitfalls, right? We've seen megachurch pastors or celebrity pastors and how, it is hard if that person does fall. And I would also offer the warning that people who are really narcissistic, like they're drawn to positions like a pastor because they like to be in the spotlight. So not everybody with charisma is using it for the Lord's glory, but that doesn't mean that everybody with charisma is, this kind of fake charlatan type of character. Can you think of a time where you ever had to turn on like feminine charm for the good of the kingdom?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I
First one
can't.
that comes to mind is Esther, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that she is an example of a woman who used some of her charm.
Yeah.
She rose to the place she was because she was beautiful. She had charm to invite her husbands to this, kind of beautiful banquet that she set up for him. And she did it to save her people, right? So I think about it. I heard a really interesting, I forget if it was a TED Talk, or I think this was even before TED Talks were a thing. And it was a former beauty queen, like a former Miss America or somebody like that. talking about beauty privilege, and this was before things like white privilege became more common in the vernacular. So I don't even think she would have used the term beauty privilege, but I think we can recognize that women who are seen as conventionally beautiful do have certain things come more easily to them, right? They have, and that's not something to hate on them for. That's not something to be jealous of. It doesn't mean that they're flaky or, or all these things that we sometimes tell ourselves. But for example, like a woman who is conventionally beautiful, who's teaching aerobics, is going to have an easier time in general attracting an Instagram following than somebody who is not as conventionally good looking. And there are, of course, all kinds of exceptions and all kinds of niches. But it was the first time I kind of realized, oh, yeah, actually, if you are a woman and you are an attractive woman, certain things are easier for you, easier to get somebody's attention, and things like that. My opinion of that, and the point of this woman talking was, instead of feeling guilty that things come easier to you, or if you don't consider yourself to be somebody with this beauty privilege, instead of hating the women who do have it, if you're in a position of privilege, the question to ask yourself is, what can I do to help other people whose voices aren't heard as much? And so we kind of have this joke in our head about the beauty queens, like, oh, I want world peace. But you know what? Maybe you are up there on that platform, and maybe you are allowed to draw attention to a cause that God has placed on your heart. Like, I'm not afraid or ashamed to admit that I have had this like super extravagant daydream where my first novel, The Beloved Daughter, is turned into a movie. That movie wins an Academy Award. I get to be at the Oscars. I get to, like have someone do all my hair and my makeup, and I get like a professional stylist to help me choose my dress. And maybe I even learn how to walk in heels, which I never did, right? I have that dream. And the reason I'm not embarrassed, because I mean, a lot of people would be embarrassed, be like, yeah, I've daydreamed about this. I'm not embarrassed because in my mind, the speech I'm giving is drawing attention to the believers in North Korea who are experiencing persecution, right? And so I would say wherever you fall on the spectrum, you are more beautiful than you think you are in other people's mind. I think we can just say that as a blanket statement. 100% of women are more beautiful than they think they are.
Yeah,
Like
I think
if
so.
you were to, and I know some people wouldn't even like the fact that I hate the fact that there is a scale, but there is. So if you were to put yourself on a 1 through 10, and then 10 people who don't know you are asked to put you on that scale of 1 to 10, your number is going to be lower than what they come up with. Like, I think that is blanket for all of us. And so I think that's freeing to recognize, right? And then it's also freeing to realize, oh, okay, so to whatever degree of attraction or charm or charisma God has given me, or that I have learned to develop in myself, I can use that for the glory of God. Like, I've started to pay more attention to what I wear now that I'm leading music. And 20-year-old me would have hated that. 20-year-old me would be like, you have become so fake. You have
Right, would have
become,
rebelled against it.
yes, you have become so shallow. I don't even know you anymore. Who do you think you are? But and I'm like literally I need everybody to understand, because not everybody understands how casual Alaska is. This means that I have gone from wearing like black pants and snow boots and a sweater to black pants and a sweater and nicer boots. Like that's truly the distinction. But I do it because I don't want to be a distraction, right? I don't want people up there to be like, oh, she's got her shirt untucked, or, like, oh, she's got all these tags sticking out. And you know what? If I did, let's say I get up there and I've got toilet paper like trailing behind me, that's everybody else's business if they decide to judge me for that. But to the extent that I can, I am taking a little more care. Like I make my hair wash day usually Saturday so that it looks its best by Sunday, right? And 20-year-old me would have been shocked that there is a way to pay attention to your physical appearance and not have it be the most self-centered, disgusting, frivolous thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, and going back to ranking yourself and,
Uh,
on a numerical scale, I think another thing to keep in mind is how many times have you met someone and if you had to give a number, you would give a certain number, but when you get to know them, that number goes up
mm-hmm,
or down.
mm-hmm.
I
Right?
mean, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, to keep in mind, I think, a lot of what this is saying is, charm. And I think when I hear the word charm, it also brings to mind like sorcery kind of like putting a
Yeah.
charm on someone, like
Right?
like putting a spell on people
Yeah.
to make them like you and to draw them to you and to put a facade
Mm-hmm.
out there that's beyond
Mm-hmm.
kind of masking who you truly are.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
look at it that way, that is deceptive. That is definitely
Mm-hmm.
deceptive. But when you meet a person and you get to know them, I mean, many times your, I don't know, esteem for them or the way that you perceive them will change based on the more you get to know them, either the more or less
Mm-hmm.
attractive of a person you find them to be.
Yeah.
And so while the goal isn't to be more attractive to people, I think to keep in mind, like the way that you are putting yourself out there goes so much deeper than even just the surface or whatever it is that there's a something else, what the je ne sais quoi that the French say. It's the I don't
You
know
said that
what.
nicely.
Did I did take French in high school, but that's like the limit. Je ne
I am
sais pas
impressed.
is my other, I don't know. But it just, there's something about people that's deeper
Hmm.
than whatever, and it comes
Yeah.
across when you're genuine. And I think when you go on, a woman who fears the Lord, not only should they be praised, but it's something when you fear God and when God is your focus, there is something very confident, like that, confidence that comes from
Hmm.
not constantly wondering what other people are thinking or not
Yeah.
changing your exercise routine to make it just so that you can look a certain way or,
Right.
you
Hmm.
know, I don't know. But I think there's that, the focus on the deeper things is always going to be a benefit. And it's not an either or. I think you become more beautiful
Mm.
as you cultivate your inner spiritual connection to God. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I love the photographers who will like specifically photograph older women
Mhm.
to kind of capture the beauty of what society doesn't see as like conventional beauty. And I think that there is something amazing about being to look back at yourself in your teens, be like, oh, what a pretty teenager. Look at yourself in your 20s. Oh, what a pretty young woman. One of the things that really helped me to stop judging myself as harshly and how I looked, it was just this Facebook meme that was going around, and it was meant as a joke. And it was like, I wish I were as fat today as I was the first day I thought I was fat. Right. So like, you're 14 years old and like the scale hits a certain number and like, oh no, I'm fat. And then 30 years and 100 pounds later, you're looking back like, girl, I wish I was fat, with that definition of fat. And so what it did is it just made me always challenge myself if I'm at a point where I am feeling like bad about where I'm at today. I picture myself like 30 years from now, looking back at, I look at my teenage self and being like, honey, you're gorgeous. You were gorgeous and you are gorgeous. And that's a gift that you can, kind of give to yourself is, how many of us don't like to be photographed, right? And I'm at a stage right now where like all of my pictures of myself turn out like I feel like everything's from the wrong angle and everything's got the wrong lighting and all of this, but like I make myself not delete them because I think back to myself as a teenager and all the photos I would have deleted, if I had a smartphone and selfies. And I can look back and objectively say that I was not ugly, at 16 years old. And so I take that same logic. So I say, okay, if I thought I was fat and ugly as a 16-year-old, but now as a 41-year-old, I can look back and say, no, you're beautiful. That means that if I feel fat or ugly as a 41-year-old, when I'm in my 70s, I'm going to look back and say, no, you're beautiful. Right. And so I'm trying to just kind of adopt that now. And, and it's not easy to do. And we already gave this tip once, but I think it could really help if you're having a hard time seeing yourself as beautiful. Train yourself to see every woman you come across as beautiful. Train yourself to look at your daughter. You would never look at your daughter, be like, oh yeah, you're ugly, or you're, this or that. You would look at your daughter and say, you're so beautiful. Train yourself to do that to every single woman you see. Just in your mind, that first thing that pops into your mind is like, thank you, Lord, for creating this beautiful woman. And then when you glance at yourself in the mirror, it'll be easier for you to eventually learn to say that about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good point for all of us to just
Yeah.
remember, like just at any point, train yourself to be gracious to others or tap
Mhm.
into that graciousness that you have for other people, and hopefully it'll become a habit for yourself.
Yeah. My husband said something really sweet to me when we were engaged. So my wedding dress had maybe like 1 inch sleeves that were a little off the shoulder. And so it was a couple months before our wedding. And I told him, like, I've started doing some weights to get my arms toned for the wedding. And I forget exactly how he said it, but the gist of it is like, well, who are you trying to impress? Because you already know, like, that I love you exactly as you are. So, like, basically, it was like, but why are you worried about this? It was really
Yeah, it
sweet.
is true. And yeah,
Hmm.
who are we? Who is, and I think if we find ourselves doing negative self-talk or thinking badly about ourselves, I think that's a good question to ask. Like,
Hmm.
where is this coming from?
Yeah.
Because I would say there are unfortunately some times where there's a person or the person that you're closest to that's giving you those things. But I would
Hmm.
say more often than not, it's imaginary. It's coming from
Hmm.
in your own, your own like self-critic,
Yep.
your nasty inner voice,
Hmm.
your inner critic,
Yeah.
or just from what we perceive to be the ideal in whatever
Yeah.
case. And that perception is so off. I was just reading an article about just how drastically beauty standards have changed in art over the centuries. And these studies
Hmm.
of all
Hmm.
kinds of standards of beauty, women, men, all the through the spectrum, and how
Hmm.
they have been altered. And not that or I guess not how they've been altered, how art a lot of times will reflect the society's view of beauty, but other times art doesn't reflect it. Sometimes art dictates it. So look
Drives
at,
it.
there's
Hmm.
like this tiny group of people, whether it's in our day and age today, whether it's the people that drive the fashion industry or
It's the
social
celebrities.
media or
Hmm.
celebrities or whatever,
Hmm.
but there are just a few people at the top and they decide every year what's going to be in, what's going to be out. And that's why I do appreciate the focus more recently on showing diversity of size, shape, color,
Hmm.
everything, just
Yeah.
showing different abilities, just
Yes.
showing those things out there. So those are also accepted and reflected as beautiful.
Yeah. Do you find, because, I'm not raising daughters, and so I remember being in like middle school and early high school in the 90s, and everybody had eating disorders, and everybody was like, okay, I can't be over 100 pounds, and I've got to have the
When
the
you were in
teeniest.
California too, right? Where
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
like
where it's,
the
yeah, it
hub
was a
of,
big, big deal. And do you find that today's preteens and young teens have it less extreme than that? Or do you think it's just as prevalent?
it's
Whatever the
hard to
standards
say.
are.
I
Yeah.
mean, my daughter is 11, so she's right on the cusp. So in a way, I think my daughter is a little different because kind of like you were saying, it was just you and your dad.
Hmm.
She's surrounded by brothers and,
Right. Well, in Alaska, she grew up in
and
Alaska
in
where nobody
Alaska,
cares.
it is different. It's
It
very
is.
different. And
Yeah.
so it was funny because she's not on social media. She does watch some YouTube, but they
Mhm.
don't have like TikTok or Instagram or anything like
Yeah.
that. But she does see stuff come through like the trends. But
Hmm.
what I noticed, so I think I felt almost the opposite. Like she didn't have as much of a desire or freedom to be
Mm.
feminine. And to the point where,
Oh.
like, I
Hmm.
think did I share this story about over the summer when we moved here? Like, she got some, like, little fake nail things because she wanted to
Okay.
stop biting her nails. So,
Okay.
just for fun, she wanted
Yeah.
to get these little, like, press-on nail things.
Hmm.
Anyway, she was playing around with them, putting them on and like cutting them short so they looked like normal nails, but just like
Right.
not bitten nails.
Yeah.
And her brother came home from hockey practice, and kind of shamed her about it. And she was
Yeah.
devastated. And I just thought, I don't want to force her to do
Hmm.
things that are more feminine than what she wants to do. But when she wants to do those things, I want her to be free to do them. So, like
Yeah.
for her, I almost felt like it was the opposite. But now that we've moved, I feel like this area, like she came home one day and just was like, some of the girls at school, just like all recess, they practice these dances, and it turns out they were
Mm.
TikTok dances, like the
Uh,
and she was puzzled by it, and like,
yeah.
but I'm slowly seeing her, like she wanted to go to Sephora. She wanted to see what was in it. She had
Hmm.
never been in there. She had never
Yeah.
seen makeup. She wanted to get a certain lip gloss with her money that she
Hmm.
had, made.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing her starting to branch out. So I think
Hmm.
my experience with her is different because I don't think she's quite in the thick of it yet.
Right.
So my long convoluted way of getting to, I don't know.
Yeah.
I suspect it's worse though, because
Think so.
back in our day, all we had to compare ourselves to were the girls in our school, or in our community.
And 17 magazine. Do you
And
remember that?
17 magazine,
Teen
yes,
magazine
or
and
teen
17
magazine,
magazine.
yes. But that was it. And now you
Mhm.
have Instagram, which is
True.
heavily curated, filter heavy.
Hmm.
You could put filters on.
True.
And I just think beauty standards for from what I can see as an adult woman, what I see
Hmm.
coming through, and also having worked in the middle school in
Yeah.
Anchorage, I just see there, even with Anchorage being a lot more casual maybe
Hmm.
than LA
For sure.
for sure. But I see a lot of fake eyelashes and
Okay.
like heavy makeup, which we had heavy makeup. I
Hmm.
remember I wanted to wear blue eyeshadow
I
and,
bet.
the
Because you were kind of
pink.
more 80s. Like, did you
I
have
was
big
very
hair,
80s.
big
Oh,
bangs,
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Aquanet? Oh.
Aquanet, like I could still smell it burning on the curling iron.
Oh.
Yeah.
That would be
Anyway,
fun to see. You'll have to share some pictures. I
oh
haven't ever
yeah, the
seen
jelly
pictures of you
bracelets.
as a teen.
Ooh, oh, we have to. Yeah, okay,
We'll do.
absolutely, we'll do.
Everybody run to Praying Christian Women at Instagram and we'll both. I've got a pretty cute one when I'm in my little cheerleading Palmer
Oh,
uniform.
cute.
Like,
Okay, we'll have to do that.
oh,
Yeah,
funny.
but anyway, I think it's worse. I think we have more to compare ourselves to, and kids, I
Mm,
think today have more standards that they're exposed to now, and
yeah.
so it just seems like maybe it's more difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's always going to be important to remember who's kind of driving that. And it's just like in that Dr. Seuss book, it's the charlatans who are out for money. Like the reason that women shave their legs, do you know the history in America of women shaving their legs?
No, I don't.
After World War II, the razor industry was just not thriving and there weren't enough men who wanted to buy razors. And so they started a campaign to start selling razors to women by saying that beauty means you don't have hair on your legs or hair on your armpits. I can think of several scenarios that are exactly like that, where basically the standard of beauty was because somebody in marketing dictated it, right?
Somebody told us.
That's the reason why diamond rings are engagement rings. Did you know that? It was
I'd
back to
heard
like
that.
one very specific advertising campaign from one very specific jeweler. And now for decades, or maybe probably more than 100 years, we are all taught that, diamonds are the epitome of love and glamour. And they're definitely not the rarest gem. They're I mean, depending, you don't have to think they're the most beautiful, right? Like everybody gets to define what's beautiful for themselves. So I think it's important when you start feeling bad or you start being like, ooh, I wish I had changed this one thing about me. Like, I remember once I overheard two girls on the bus complaining about this is at the height of me being like super conscious about every part of my body. And so I knew that girls were supposed to get like big breasts and little tiny tight butts and little trim tight thighs. And that was it. Oh, and flat tummies. Then on the bus, I heard two girls talking about another girl, like, ooh, her calves are funny. And that was the very first time, like, oh, I'm supposed to now also like care about what my calves look like, Or
Right.
when I was in South Korea, somebody was explaining that there's this beauty standard, and I can't even picture it, but like some eyelids have one fold and some eyelids have two folds. And it's not
Yes.
the almond Asian eyes that you think of. It's some just to me until somebody tells you to look for it. And I still couldn't tell you how many folds I have or any other woman in my life. But at certain parts of the world, they are told, oh, you're beautiful if you have this many folds. So people are getting surgeries to correct it. And again, it goes back to that con man from Dr. Seuss. I think it's Sylvester McMonkey McBean or something like that is his name. And it just goes back to that, or it goes back to the razor industry saying, how can we sell more razors? Oh, let's convince women that shaving their legs is the standard of beauty. Now, what I think is important is for us to know what's driving it, which is greed, but to also recognize that doesn't mean that women who shave their legs are horrible, selfish people. It doesn't mean that women who don't shave their legs are somehow more holy or humble or wholesome. I think again, it goes back to whatever you do it for the glory of God. If I still lived
Yeah.
in California and was wearing shorts in the summer because it's really, really hot and out all the time, I'd be shaving my legs. Since I live in Alaska where nobody, like not even my kids, see my legs, like they could probably go 2 or 3 years without seeing my legs. Like I haven't taken a razor to my legs in quite a while. But that doesn't make me any different in God's eyes than the woman who shaves her legs every single day, right? Or than the woman who pays somebody to permanently remove stuff, right? It can just be what it is. It can be the same thing as like I ate Cheerios or I ate oatmeal, right? This doesn't have to be tied up to our sense of self-worth or to our spiritual walk or to how beautiful we are. It just kind of is.
Yeah, I mean, it talks about beauty is fleeting, and another word that, like in the lexicon, it says it's a vapor. I mean, it really is in the
Mm-hmm,
grand scheme of
mm-hmm.
things. I think it all goes to where's your focus?
Yeah.
Is your deepest focus and belief that God is eternal and that we will exist with him forever in eternity, and that eternity will so far outweigh the physical things of this earth?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you so wrapped up? I think some of it boils down to time and the amount of mental space that we have,
Mm-hmm.
and not being obsessed with that stuff, and
Yeah.
not letting it be a hindrance one way or another. If having
Mm-hmm.
hairy legs is a hindrance to you moving forward in your day and feeling confident,
Mm-hmm.
then shave your legs. And
Yep.
you know what I mean? Like you said, just
Exactly.
let
It
it be a
doesn't have
quick
to be a
choice.
big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what would you say is a woman who fears the Lord? Like, what comes to mind if you think, okay, if charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, not evil, but fleeting. Let's not give it too much credit. Let's not
Right.
look at it as
Mm-hmm.
evil. What's the other side of the coin? Like, what are the eternal things? What does that look like in practice for you when you think of a woman who fears the Lord?
Yeah. Back when I was way more concerned about how I looked, the verses I would go back to are the verses where we are told like how to clothe ourselves. So in Colossians it says, clothe yourself with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. Or so basically like taking the same amount of time and energy that I wanted to spend on my physical looks
Mhm.
and basically turning that inward to I want to be a young woman of wisdom. I want to be a young woman of grace or gentleness because I feel like every single one of us could shut our eyes. And if I said, picture a beautiful and gentle older woman, I think all of us could picture somebody who's like that, who even just the image just makes us feel at peace. And she's got wrinkles and she's got gray hair and she's got like fat paddings that make her like so much nicer to hug. And so I feel like the the ability to focus on your inner virtue is going to make you more attractive. And the goal shouldn't be, I want to learn how to be a more patient person because then I'm going to, look prettier on the outside and more people will like me. That shouldn't be the goal. But I do think that's the outcome a lot of the time, right? Or, we've all seen shut your eyes and picture a beautiful woman that you would never want to be friends with. That's really easy to picture, to come up with. And so I don't know, fearing the Lord feels so loaded. I've heard so many people give so many different definitions of what it is and isn't, that I don't know that I can like give you an amazing, this is what Alana believes it means. But I think about like if you clothe yourselves in these virtues or the fruits of the spirit, like you cannot not be beautiful. Right. And I'm not talking about just in God's eyes, the face that only Jesus would love. I'm talking about like you will be a beautiful woman and you will be a beautiful human being, and your body might look entirely different than what 100 people would define as what's beautiful. But who's to say that in 30 years, standards won't change again, and the exact, size and style you are is going to be what everybody wants. And but yeah, these virtues get stronger with time. These virtues make you more gracious, more gentle, more sanctified, more of that picture of that old woman with, with fat pads and with wrinkles and with gray hair and with lots of wisdom and lots of patience and lots of compassion, and the kind of woman you just want to be around because you feel calm and at peace in her presence. That's what we can focus on turning into.
Yeah, and I love your point about becoming more so. There are times in my life where I've felt like I wasn't becoming better. I've looked at spans of like in the last year, have I become more like Jesus? Have I become more worldly? Where is my focus turned? And so I love that idea of the goal being becoming clothed more beautifully spiritually, and I think that when we shift that balance from, I think you can look at it as scales kind of on how you're spending your time and your thought
Mm,
energy and your mental and emotional energy, like how much of that is being spent on the external versus the internal. And if that balance is off, and I think we'll notice it. I think we'll notice ourselves
mm,
becoming, because we're never static. I mean, you're never
yeah.
not changing. I mean, as time goes on,
Hmm.
every second, every moment, we're becoming something. And
Hmm.
I think it just kind of, to think of it in terms of, do I want to become more spiritually beautiful, or do I want that part of me to waste away and focus more on only the external? And there could be a
Hmm.
balance, but it should never
Yeah.
be one-sided toward the beauty side on the
Yeah.
outside, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I think it's
mm,
exactly like seek first his kingdom, and all these other things are just going to fall into place, and that's a paraphrase, but I kind of see it as if you focus on your relationship with the Lord, if you focus on developing these virtues and these fruits of the Spirit, then whatever happens is going to make you more beautiful. It'll either be an inner beauty that people around you notice, or it will be, okay, yeah, now I can spend a little more time making my hair look nice on Sunday morning, right? Because why not? And, and again, it doesn't have to be this loaded thing. It doesn't have to be, oh, I spent 20 minutes on my makeup, but only 10 minutes on the Bible. Like
right,
God's
yeah,
God's
that's
not.
counterproductive.
Yeah, right. So focus on the Lord. Again, yeah, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be given to you as well. Focus on your walk with God, prioritize your walk with God, and trust that the amount of time or energy or money that you spend on the more external things is going to be exactly where it should be. And that is going to be different for every single one of us. If Scott was a senator in DC, it would be part of my responsibility as his wife to spend more time on how I dressed and how I looked And right now that sounds like, oh, please don't ever make me do that. But,
Please don't be, don't run for Senate,
you know, but
is my first thought.
I know it's just the motives behind it. Am I doing this because I want to be on the cover of the magazine, or am I doing this because I want to support my husband, or I don't want to be a distraction, right? I think that we all live in these pockets of subcultures, and it is okay to allow yourself to, and I'm going to use a very loaded word, to conform to that pocket of culture to a degree just so that you can be relatable and so that you can meet people where they are. You know, I heard a really good policy that a pastor's salary should be almost to the penny the average annual income of the people at his church, right? Because you don't want your pastor living, you know, if you go to the type of church where everybody's a really high earner and everybody is more fashion conscious or more, that kind of thing. Your pastor, if they're living, at a pauper salary, might sound holy to some people, but they aren't going to be able to relate in the same way as a pastor who's making 5 times or 50 times what the average member in his congregation earns. Then he's not relatable either, right? So,
Right.
so much of it boils down to the pocket where you live, right? So, if you were to transplant our family to someplace like Los Angeles, I would, yeah, I would spend more time thinking about things like that. What does my dress, what does my appearance say about me, what I think about myself, what I think about my family, my respect for you, right? Like if I show up to have lunch with Jamie and we live in LA and, she's taken an hour to get ready to have lunch with me and I show up in my Alaska wear, in my kind of Alaska style, if I know that that's going to be insulting to Jamie, that's actually not like, oh, look at me, I'm humble and holy because I don't care. That's actually me being disrespectful to you. So I think it all just depends on where you are, your kind of subculture, and your motives. That's where it's always going to come down to.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I am glad we got to chat about this, and we will see everybody next time.